Welcome to World News Today. Here are the top stories for now. Trump asks Australian Prime Minister to help investigate Russia inquiry. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was on the Trump-Ukraine phone call, reports. Irish customs checks will be a reality after Brexit, Boris Johnson stated. How Iran's president left Trump hanging and Macron in the hell. You are watching the headlines. Now the details. US President Donald Trump called Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison and asked for his help with an investigation into the origins of the Mueller inquiry. Australian officials have confirmed Mr. Trump asked Mr. Morrison to help find evidence to discredit the inquiry, US and Australian media reported. Australia confirmed the call had taken place and that the Prime Minister agreed to help. The revelation comes as Mr. Trump faces impeachment proceedings at home over a call with another foreign leader. The president is accused of pressuring the leader of Ukraine to investigate domestic political rival Joe Biden in a phone call which was exposed by a whistleblower last week. The call spurred Democrats to launch impeachment proceedings, and on Monday, the president's lawyer Rudy Giuliani was served with a subpoena. Meanwhile, the Washington Post has reported that U.S. Attorney General William Barr held private meetings with Italian and British intelligence officials to ask for assistance in the investigation of the Mueller inquiry. A source told the paper Mr. Barr visited Italy last week, and not for the first time. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was one of the Trump administration officials who was on the president's July 25 phone call with Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky, according to media reports. The call is at the center of an anonymous whistleblower complaint that alleged Trump used the powers of his office to pressure the foreign leader into investigating political rival and former Vice President Joe Biden. The Wall Street Journal first reported Monday that Pompeo listened in on the call. According to a summary of that call released by the White House last week, Trump asked Zelensky to look into Biden and his son, Hunter. Pompeo's name was not mentioned in the whistleblower complaint, which was declassified and released last week. As part of their formal impeachment inquiry, House Democrats issued a subpoena to Pompeo on Friday to obtain any documents related to the State Department's role in arranging conversations between Trump's personal lawyer Rudy Giuliani and Ukraine officials. Giuliani posted a screenshot of a text message on Twitter last week that appeared to come from the now-resigned State Department Special Envoy to Ukraine, Kurt Volker. That message and allegations in the whistleblower complaint suggest that the State Department had a hand in Giuliani's role with Ukraine. I never talked to a Ukrainian official until the State Department called me and asked me to do it, Giuliani told Fox News last week, and then I reported to every conversation back to them. The whistleblower complaint lists another top State Department official. T. Ulrich Brackbull as being on the call. Here's what I will say this morning about the engagement of the State Department, Pompeo told reporters last week. Before he says he read the full complaint. To the best of my knowledge, so from what I have seen so far, each of the actions that were undertaken by State Department officials was entirely appropriate and consistent with the objective that we have had certainly since this new government has come into office. Boris Johnson says the reality of Brexit is there will need to be customs checks on the island of Ireland after the UK leaves the EU. But the PM rejected claims that would effectively mean a hard border in the form of a series of customs posts set 5 or 10 miles back. He told BBC Radio 4's Today program, a sovereign united country must have a single customs territory. He refused to give details but said formal proposals would be made soon. Government sources told the BBC on Monday night it had prepared the legal text of an updated Brexit deal and would be making more plans public in the coming days. Sources also accused unnamed individuals in the European Commission of trying to create a hostile reaction to the revised Brexit deal in order to put pressure and the government to make more concessions. The UK is set to leave the EU on 31st October. Mr. Johnson has said the exit will go ahead with or without a deal, despite MPs passing a law last month forcing him to explore an extension from the EU if Parliament hasn't voted in favor of a specific deal or leaving without one. The telephone lines had been separately set up. President Trump waited on the other end. All President Hassan Rouhani of Iran had to do was come out of his hotel suit and walk into a secure room where Mr. Trump's voice would be piped in by a speaker. Mr. Rouhani and his aides were blindsided by the offer presented to them by President Emmanuel Macron of France on an unannounced visit last Tuesday night to the quarters at the Millennium Hilton Hotel near the United Nations, where world leaders had converged for the annual General Assembly. It was a mission lifted out of a Hollywood thriller. Mr. Macron has sought for months to broker a thaw in the standoff between the United States and Iran, which has threatened to escalate into a new Middle East war. Accompanied by a small team of advisors, Mr. Macron awaited an answer outside the Iranian leader's suite, according to 3 people with knowledge of the diplomatic gambit, which was first reported on Monday by the New York Masses. Messages were passed between them by Mr. Rouhani's aides. In the end, Mr. Rouhani refused even to come out of his room. Mr. Macron left empty-handed and Mr. Trump was left hanging, with no guarantee that Mr. Trump would end the onerous sanctions he has imposed on Iran. Mr. Rouhani feared he would be trapped in an encounter that Mr. Trump could exploit as a headline-grabbing success. The people with knowledge of the episode said it also was clear that Mr. Rouhani might suffer a political backlash at home, where hardliners were already forming at the mere possibility that Mr. Rouhani would consider a dialogue with Mr. Trump. For the Iranians, however, the incident underscored what they see as Mr. Trump's eagerness, bordering on desperation, to create a theatrical moment like he achieved with North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un at the Singapore summit in June 2018. For them, it was a validation that their strategy of escalating tensions in response to Mr. Trump's maximum pressure campaign of sanctions was paying off. And for Rouhani, talking to Trump is a liability, said Ali Weiss, director of the Iran program at the International Crisis Group, a research organization on conflict resolution. Mr. Rouhani would not take such a risk, Mr. Weiss said, unless he knew a reward would come out of it. And that's the end of the news. Thank you very much for staying with us.